Hey, today I want to give you a behind the scenes view into a conversation in one of my small group social media masterminds. These masterminds are for people who are just learning how to connect with people for their business. And since it's a nice small group of 7 people, we get to have some real talk. And today we're going to have some real talk about resistance. Now, I'm just going to read this thread to you, and I'm wondering if any of this relates to you. Okay, so client number 1 says, "Hi, Tasha and company. I'm getting hung up on value posts. I know that you are suggesting to be via video for us, and the quick recipe is something like 3 tips to help blank your blank. The 3rd tip should be your product or service and the easiest solution to the problem." Yep, got it. But how can we just show things to people? So she gives some ideas there. Okay, so I've been listening. I know you said little or no DIY, blah, 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 blah. I'm having a hard time creating value for X product. Am I overthinking? Yes, probably always. Let's be real. Does anyone have any value post examples they'd be willing to share for inspiration? So I responded, okay, well, let's think of some other ideas that would add value, sharing something helpful to your target market from another page, maybe, and I give a couple of ideas. And then I shared another challenge is that you might need a fresh list of problems for your target market. So that's when I get stuck with value posts or I'm not reading enough. Client number 1 responds, "You're so right about this. I think I'm just blocking myself, surprised, thinking that my everyday business life is something that's separate from the content I'm creating. It's actually one and the same." And I responded, "I spend most of my time in a tantrum that I don't know what my target market wants. You aren't alone. There's a way out if you don't beat yourself up over resistance." To which client number 1 says, "Tasha, take my money," which is always nice to hear. "That meant so much to hear. Thank you." And then I shared with her that my business partner, Karen, and we had a long conversation about live coaching calls and how we literally couldn't answer that particular day due to resistance. What's the purpose of the calls? And I responded to her, I said, "It's okay, we're gonna figure it out." Yesterday, I had a client time block how long she thought she would take to write the next phase of her content. Then I made her double it to account for resistance. Try that. And client number 1 responds, "Tasha, so very helpful. At this point, it's taking me a week to throw a tantrum and about 60 minutes to write all the content and 30 minutes to prep or record anything. Upon reflection, I can see what I'm spending most of my time on. It's nice to hear that I'm not alone in all this, and it's time to manage my time a little differently and have a tantrum during other work hours instead of during content creation hours." So a different client hops in. "Oh, okay, so it's okay to have a tantrum when you're trying to figure out what to freaking post. This week drove me crazy because I decided to post my personal page, my customer group, and my business page. Trying to come up with 3 different things suitable for the target market made me want to pull my hair out. However, I do have to say I had the most engagement in all 3 areas ever." So I responded, "Congrats on the highest engagement. Also, okay, in addition to pulling your hair out, is hiding under the blanket, staring at the wall, scribbling circles on a notepad, eating chocolate chips, pouring a glass of wine." And I gave some other examples if it's too early in the day for wine to keep for maximum productivity, to keep you productive and not napping. And then I shared with them both. It takes me 3 hours to do a podcast, a little less than 2 hours of whining, tantrum, and indecision, 30 minutes to write, 15 minutes to record, 20 to 30 to do all the tech. When I figured this out, it changed the game. The meltdown is optional sometimes. And so then client number 2 hops in and asked, "Hopefully, will it be less painful as time goes on?" And my response was, "I think it's sort of how you learn not to touch a bruise. The bruise doesn't stop being painful, but you learn it's counterproductive to poke it. Yes, you get faster with experience, less emotional about it, and start to view everything as an experience and a game, which frees up the emotional nature of content creation. But for sure, the only way out is through, and accepting the resistance part of the process instead of a reason to quit is really, really helpful from spiraling. In fact, I'm responding to you right now instead of recording. Darn you, resistance." And then client 3 hops in. "This is so good to hear. I thought I was the only one having tantrums about content creation. Definitely need to double the planning phase, sometimes more, just because I can't decide on a direction and stay with it. I've gone as far as to plan everything out and then change completely as I put it in the computer. Nothing like doing it twice. I wanted to share with that whole story with you because there were 4 people who were totally committed to their success and encountering massive resistance and then feeling shame about it and feeling frustrated. And I think that that has to be something that you can understand. What is resistance? According to Merriam-Webster, it's an act or instance of opposition. But what does this mean in business? A few years ago, my coach recommended I read The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And here are some of my biggest takeaways, just off the top of my head. Number 1, business is art. We're in a constant state of creating. Now, maybe it's social media content, but even outreach or coaching or recruiting, that's all creating. Number 2, the amateur creates when he or she feels like it. The professional creates every day, no matter what he or she is feeling. And the third is mental and emotional resistance to the creation process is normal for the professional. In fact, I concluded that it was a rite of passage. So what does this mean? Here's the scenario. You sit down to create social media content, make phone calls, plan your week, whatever. You have 30-minute schedule to complete this creation task. Then you're stuck, writer's block, procrastination. And if you're anything like me, you get panicked and start screaming at yourself, brain, work, we don't have time for this. For me, it's only a few seconds of shame, a few seconds before shame starts to set in. And I'm like, Tasha, get your crap together. Why can't you ever just work without throwing a tantrum? Now the time has passed. I haven't done a thing. I feel shame over it, and my self-esteem starts to erode. Any work I did wasn't my best work because of my mental state, and I was in a panic. Can you relate? And my job is literally content creation. And so if you relate with that, I think it's pretty normal. And I have a couple of really simple, practical solutions that'll help. So here we go. Number 1, understand the planning fallacy. The planning fallacy was first coined in 1977 by psychologist Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. And it just says we have a tendency to severely underestimate the amount of time a task is going to take because we don't consider how long it's taken us before, and we'll also assume we won't run into any complications that might cause delays. Here's a good example. I always tell my mom that we can get to our house in 10 minutes. In theory, that's how long it should take. But it takes me 12 to 15 minutes no matter what. I still, no matter how many times I've been there, still keep thinking it will take 10 minutes. And I like to think I'm a pretty smart person, but not when it comes to that. And that's because of the planning fallacy. Now, the second key to kind of working through all of this is to acknowledge that resistance is real and it's a prerequisite to success, not evidence that you won't be successful. Every business person encounters resistance. The bigger the reward is on the other side, the higher resistance you're going to face. Resistance is one of those complications that will lengthen the time it will take. And the third thing that I think will be really helpful for you to understand, and this is actually the tactic I want you to take away from this video or podcast or however you're consuming this. Double the time you're allowing yourself to do something. Recently, and I mentioned this when I was reading back the conversation we were having, I was coaching a client who was writing a course and she was encountering massive resistance. Procrastination set in. She thought, I can knock this out in a few hours, then resistance hit. Matthew Kelly is quoted as saying, most people overestimate what they can do in a day, but they underestimate what they can do in a month. We overestimate what we can do in a year, but we underestimate what we can accomplish in a decade. And my client was running into this as well. So I encouraged her to double the time she gave herself for the task. I asked her how long she thought it would take for her next module. I think she said 4 hours. So I said, okay, give yourself 8 hours. And it was her only task for the weekend. I encouraged her to sit in the resistance, don't switch tasks to be more productive, and just wrestle with it. And she killed it. If you wrestle with resistance, you will win eventually. Your will is stronger than resistance, but you need to remember that you are the champion. So just stare it down, take a deep breath, welcome the fight, and put your opponent away. In the next 2 weeks, that client got more done in less time than when she was trying to cram more stuff in less time. And that's crazy. So let's look at a few reasons why doubling the amount of time you estimate for every task will actually increase your productivity. Number 1, you'll be more relaxed when you enter the task. So you'll be able to get into flow state faster. When you hit resistance, which you will be in such a rush. So instead of multitasking to feel productive, you'll just keep brainstorming or use your mind to imagine positive outcomes until you believe it. Every time you switch tasks away from what you're trying to do, it's going to take you like 20 minutes to get back into, like, the 20-minute timer will start to reset every single time. And it's going to really impact the amount of time it takes you to complete that task in the beginning. And so doubling the time you allow yourself is actually going to give you, it'll decrease the temptation to multitask. And the third reason that this will increase your productivity is you'll probably complete your task a little early instead of a little late. For me, this stops me from my shame spiral. It's really sad that often I or some of my clients will complete something and then we'll feel bad about it because it took me longer than I should have. And should, that's a shame word. When I double the time allowed, I almost always complete it early. This leaves me with a double accomplishment. I finished it and I finished early. This creates a boost in self-esteem. I'm now proud of myself. I'm more likely to keep going and do more things. And isn't that really the feeling we're trying to get for ourselves, being proud of ourselves? And maybe that's too deep of a thought, but I think that's interesting. Friend, as I wrap up here, I just want to give you some encouragement. If it takes you longer to do things than you think, you are normal, and actually you are awesome. Give yourself some more time. Resistance doesn't stand a chance against you. And I want to end with a motivational quote. Well, it's kind of a dorky one. If cauliflower can somehow become pizza, then you, my friend, can accomplish anything. All right.